Hello, everybody. This is Dominic with the Wildlife Wire coming with a pretty unique video. Of course, we do not have face cam up and it's just me. However, I wanted to really cover this new game on Kickstarter that is called Kavango. And the interesting thing here is that this is actually a board game. However, it is really well detailed and I'm very excited. It has been very well funded on Kickstarter. However, there is still time to contribute. The Kickstarter closes on October 19th here in North America. But there's lots of really good stretch goals and goodies. But the reason I'm very excited for this game is that it has a very deep ecology and conservation focus to it with very detailed cards and a very unique gameplay experience that is very focused on the ecosystem as a whole. And so it's not just about playing different animal cards, but building up your ecosystem so that you can play species that have higher environmental requirements. So you have to build up your ecosystem before you can play more charismatic cards like elephants and big cats and some of the larger ungulates. So I really like that gameplay style, and it's really nice to be able to see one of these games coming into the limelight. So I have supported this game Kavango on Kickstarter, and I'm very excited to see it progress. It's been smashing its Kickstarter stretch goals, which is great to see, but I thought I would cover it to share it with more people because I think it is a game to really get excited for. It's got fantastic artwork. The gameplay seems amazing. I'm just kind of scrolling through their Kickstarter page a little bit here to kind of show you, but there's tons of different pieces added in here, and I'm very excited for what this game's going to bring. And as you can see, I mean, just stretch goal after stretch goal, they've really been knocking it out of the park, which is great. So if you do contribute to the Kickstarter, there's lots of extra goodies that are going to come with the game. But I really wanted to cover this in particular because this is a game set in the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, which is a location very near and dear to my heart. I've spent time in Southern Africa, particularly in Botswana, which Matt and Zara, who are the developers of this game, are from Botswana. So it's very exciting to see this area get some really cool representation, and it's got a great amount of biodiversity. So I'm very happy to see that we are getting 160 species cards, and after scouring video after video and image after image about anything that I could find on the internet about this game, I think I have come up with what the full species list is for Kavango, and I would like to share that in a video, which is something that hopefully we're going to be able to find out. So, to start off, what we do know about this game is that different species are labeled under different categories. And we seem to have a pretty good idea from some pre release videos of a key of sorts that tells us how many cards of each category exist. The different categories that we know of for sure are grass, tree, invertebrate, and fish. Those are your four major producers. So, two types of plants and two types of animals. And then, as for the actual animal cards that you would play and place in your nature reserve of sorts, you have small mammals, medium sized mammals, and large mammals. And the large mammals are mostly ungulates. You have predators, which is most of the very carnivorous mammals. Two types of birds, so most of the birds are in one category. However, the birds of prey are their own type of category. And finally, you have the reptiles and then the amphibians together. So I would consider that as herps from herpetology, as that's what we combine them to be. So overall, between those different groups, we have those divided up to total 160 cards. So to start off with the grasses, I'm just going to go through the plants pretty quickly. And I do know a good deal of these plants, but plant taxonomy is not my biggest forte. I'm more of a mammal guy. So I am going to be kind of brief and not go into much detail besides what the cards have listed these plants as. But there are 11 grasses, as far as we can tell, 11 grass cards. And those happen to be the wild sage, finger grass, crowfoot grass, silver grass, love grass, elephant grass, wild melon, wild cucumber, natal red top grass, red oak grass, and signal grass. And so, as you can see, there's some non-grasses in there. It seems to be more that they're using grass broadly to kind of cover any sort of ground residing plant that a grazer or a grazing type animal would require in an environment, because that's what you have to remember, is that this is kind of staying broad and working your way up. So I think they've done a better job of getting the larger animals down to species, and so the smaller animals and the plants are a bit more broad based. But moving into the trees, or if you want to call it the browsing forage, I guess, you have the baobab tree, the shepherd's tree, sausage tree, umbrella thorn acacia, the Kalahari apple leaf, the jackalberry tree, marula tree, mopani tree, brandy bush, sycamore fig, and camel thorn acacia. So that gives you 22 different plant cards, and that's a good chunk of your producers, which is really important for building up your ecosystem in this game, which I think is really, really nice. Moving on to the invertebrates, this is where things get tricky. I have seen two different card keys on the different variety, and so one of them has 11 invertebrates listed and the other one has 12. I was able to find 12 invertebrate cards. However, half of those cards, which this is taking into account, half of those cards are bees and termites, because there are certain animals that you have to place later that are specifically reliant on bees or termites. For example, there is a bee eater, which is a type of bird that specifically needs you to have bees in your reserve in order to be placed. Or species like the aardvark or the pangolin specifically need termites. They can't just have any invertebrate. So there are multiple cards for bee and termite, and it ends up being about half of the invertebrate cards with 2 bees and 4 termites. So of the remaining 6 invertebrate cards, or at least what I have found, is the baboon spider, the dung beetle, the scorpion, the mopani caterpillar, also known as the mopani worm, which is a really important food source, not just for a lot of animals in this region, but also the local people. It's a delicacy that I've had personally. The dragonfly and the ant. So as you can see, very broad based, once again, focusing more on using this as a preliminary resource for those bigger, more charismatic animals. The final producer category, of course, is fish, where I have found 7 species, being the tilapia, the catfish, the perch, spiny eel, the barb, a robber, and of course the last one, which technically is an invertebrate, but because it's aquatic, it's listed as a fish, is the crab. So those are all of our producer species, and then we get to start moving into talking about the more traditional animal cards that you would be placing in your reserve. So to start off, I will start off with the Herps, which I am going to give a shout out to one of our viewers, Bren's Wild World. He helped me a great deal with looking up some of the herps, because he is a reptile keeper. He knows reptiles and amphibians much better than I do, whereas my specialty is a bit more with mammals and birds. So just going through the herps that we do have, we have quite a few of them. But to start off, we have the African bullfrog, which that is one of the few that we were able to get down to species, which is really nice. You also have a gecko. It just says generic gecko, but best guess is that this is a gecko in the Homophilus genus. You also have the African red toad, which is another one that's very down to species. And then you have the grass frog, which there's tons of grass frogs. It's basically most frogs in Africa that are not the African bullfrog fall into that category of grass frog. So it's really hard to tell specifically which species this is, or even what genus this is supposed to be. But the grass frog is a card. You also have turtle, another generic one. However, this is likely a turtle in the Pelusios genus, is the thought there. To get a little bit specific, you have a lizard called the Namib rock agama. It's just listed as agama on the card. However, that seems to be the species that's likely being represented here. Another very just generic one is the water snake. There's a lot of green snakes that associate with water that are not closely related to each other, so hard to really tell which species this is supposed to be. Next up, we have a terrapin, just a generic terrapin. However, this seems to be the helmeted terrapin, is what we're going with. And finally, we also have the reed frog, which is another kind of broad-based one. However, this is likely in the genus Hyperoleus, is what we think. So again, especially the amphibians, not very much down to species. Only two amphibian species that were very much species specific, and but hopefully, maybe there is some evidence in the flavor text. It's just hard to read some of these cards. But moving on, there's also a tortoise. It's just a generic tortoise. However, it appears to be the hingeback tortoise. It doesn't look like the very popular and larger leopard tortoise of the area. So it's definitely a different species. We think it's most likely a hingeback tortoise. Next, you have two monitor species. I have seen, it looks like there are some preliminary cards because there is a generic monitor lizard card. However, you can see it on the website. There is the rock monitor listed as a card, and from scouring some images from some releases on YouTube of the instruction booklet, there is also the confirmation of a Nile monitor. So I think probably they were first only planning on having one monitor lizard, and then they decided to add two different species of monitor lizard, which are the Nile monitor and the rock monitor. Next up, going into some of the snakes, there is a cobra card. It's not listed to species, and there's quite a few that this could possibly be. Just some of the options that this cobra could possibly be are the Cape cobra, the forest cobra, the snouted cobra, or even the Mozambique spitting cobra. It's quite unclear. They all have quite similar shapes and coloration, so it could be any of those. However, a lot of the other snakes we do have down to species, being the puff adder, the black mamba, and the boom slang. Also, in the instruction booklet, there is the reveal that there is a chameleon card. It just says generic chameleon, but from my time in Botswana, my guess is that it's probably going to be a flapneck chameleon because that's really the typical subspecies that you find there. I think it's actually the only chameleon species in Botswana, and it is quite a good size. So that's all the reptiles and amphibians that I have been able to find from scouring. So moving on to the birds, this is just going to be the generic, more kind of lower tier bird category, and then I will move into the birds of prey next. So starting off, we do have the southern masked weaver, which is a really interesting bird. They create these nests and communally raise their eggs, and it's very, very interesting the way that they do all of this. As well as a parrot species, the rosy-faced lovebird got in. We do have a swallow, which seems to most likely be the barn swallow. The plover card, that looks like to be a crowned plover. And then you have some others, such as the African jacana, very famous for having the large spread out toes for walking on lily pads, as well as the lilac-breasted roller, one of my favorite birds from southern Africa. It's just got beautiful, beautiful plumage, and they actually do have a t-shirt available with the lilac-breasted roller icon on it, so that's a cool thing to potentially pick up as an add-on. The southern carmine bee-eater is the bee-eater species that they went with, another beautifully colored bird, very iconic to the region. The woodland kingfisher, that's the kingfisher species that they decided to go with, which is a species that I heard a lot during my time in Botswana. It's got a very iconic call that you hear quite a bit. The African darter, this is a species of fishing bird that's very similar to cormorants that we have in North America, though it doesn't have that hooked bill. The African darter got in. We did get a hornbill card, however, very interestingly, It is the crowned hornbill, which is not a species that I saw during my time in Botswana. I did see a lot of southern red-billed and yellow-billed hornbills, as well as the African gray hornbill, and for a brief moment the southern ground hornbill, but not the crowned hornbill, which is the one that they decided to put into the game. We also have the helmeted guinea fowl. Again, very iconic species within Africa. Very popular game bird species. There is an egret card as well. To me, this appears to be the intermediate egret based on just what I predict the size is, as well as kind of its bill shape and color. And then you also have a heron. Really glad that they went with the Goliath heron. I think it's a bird species that I don't think is talked about enough. They're really tall, really cool birds. They actually hunt young crocodiles. They're that big. Very cool. And I'm glad to see that the Goliath heron was added into the game. Next up, there's the pelican, which is representative of the great white pelican, as well as the greater flamingo. That's what the flamingo card is. That's the species chosen, and that one is actually listed in the flavor text. So that one is straight up confirmed. And next up, we have the Kori bustard, which is Botswana's national bird. So I'm really glad that that made it in. Would have been really weird if the Kori bustard did not make it onto this list. The red-billed oxpecker, that's another good famous bird for its symbiotic relationship with various ungulates where they'll feed on parasites, but they'll also break wounds open and drink the blood. So, a bit more dynamic than most people think, but again, great addition to the bird list. And finally, for the normal bird category, we have the ostrich, which is, of course, going to be the largest. Big herbivore is going to have probably the biggest requirements in order to place into your reserve, but also will be worth a lot more points. So that's the bird category. But then we also have about the equally large bird of prey category, which contains tons of really great birds that we haven't been able to list yet. But this includes things such as the African fish eagle, which is really great to see. Very similar to the bald eagle that we have here in North America. The tawny eagle, which is quite similar to a golden eagle, but quite a bit smaller. The martial eagle, which is probably my favorite bird of all time. Really cool predatory bird. And just the way that they are able to hunt some pretty big mammalian prey in addition to smaller animals is really cool to see. Very happy they made it in. My second favorite bird of all time, the secretary bird, also made it in, which is great to see. And just some other great ones like the brown snake eagle, the osprey. We got two species of vulture, the lappet-faced vulture, which is a much bigger one and is better built for breaking into carcasses, breaking through that tough hide, as well as your more typical white-backed vulture, which is a species that you would more normally associate with the word vulture. We also got the Pell's fishing owl, really cool, really rare, hard-to-spot species. Really nice to see it added in. Some others like the marsh harrier and the yellow-billed kite got in. We did get a generic owlet card, however, I'm fairly confident that it's the pearl-spotted owlet that is the most common of the owlet species that you find in this area. And to round out the bird of prey list, from what I was able to see, actually it's not really a true bird of prey, but it certainly is a predatory bird, is the marabou stork, which is of course the largest stork in Africa. It's got that very large naked head, kind of like a reminiscent of a vulture in terms of coloration and that sort of thing. But really glad that it was able to make it in. Definitely a lot of other birds that could be added. I would love to see a bird expansion maybe after the game gets successfully released and is doing well. I think there's tons of birds that we could be getting in later, but I'm going to finish the list of the species that we do know before I get into that. So finally, we're moving into the mammals, which I think is what most people are going to be really excited for, to figure out what is in. So to start off with our small mammal category, we have the fruit bat, which this is almost certainly the Peter's epauletted fruit bat. They did confirm that it was a epauletted fruit bat, and Peter's is the one that's the most common in Botswana, so that's the one that I would imagine it's based on. Also, tons of different rodents. Spring hare. Spring hare's got a very dynamic shape, kind of very similar to a jerboa or a kangaroo rat. Spring hare is going to be in the game, as well as quite a few other rodents like the African tree squirrel, which I have seen running around a lot during my time in Botswana, as well as the Cape ground squirrel and some others. Just there is a species of pygmy mouse. There's tons of different species of pygmy mice, so this is one of the few mammals that I wasn't able to get down to species just because there's so many of them. But some others, the black-tailed tree rat, that is a species that we're also getting, and we are getting a striped mouse card, and I'm fairly certain that this is supposed to be the Rosevere's striped mouse. Just it's got those obvious stripes, and it's going to be in that general region. So I'm pretty darn sure that this is supposed to be the Rosevere's striped mouse. But there's some other non-rodents that we're going to be getting, which is great. Just one of the so we've got a couple of afrotheres that we're going to be getting. So these are animals in the same clade as things like elephants, including the eastern rock elephant shrew. That seems to be the elephant shrew species that we have on the card, which is really nice. It's got a pretty short snout, so I don't think it's one of the other elephant shrew species. I'm fairly confident it's the eastern rock, as well as the bush hyrax. So those are the two afrotheres that we're going to be getting for the small mammal category, of course. And we also have a couple of primates in there. We're getting a galago, which is also sometimes known as a bush baby. We are getting the larger, greater galago, which I found interesting because when I was in Botswana, I did see the lesser galago, which I think is more of the species that you picture. However, the greater galago is still found further north in Angola, Zambia kind of area. So it's still within the Kavango, Zambezi region. So great to see a galago there. Bit surprised that they went with the greater instead of the lesser, but great to see it nonetheless. The other primate that we're getting is the vervet monkey, which of course is an absolute staple. We're also going to be getting a hare species that's going to be our lagomorph representative. It's very hard to tell hares apart to species. It's definitely either a cape hare or a scrub hare, but again, you can't really tell, and I don't think the flavor text is going to let us know which species it's supposed to be, but we are getting a hare, which is nice. So then moving on, all that's left for the small mammal category are the carnivores. So there's a couple of really small carnivores that we're going to be getting. Mongoose wise, we actually got quite a few. We're getting the marsh mongoose and the banded mongoose, as well as the very famous meerkat. Yes, the meerkat is a species of mongoose. So we're getting those three. Also, in that feliform side of the carnivores, we are going to be getting the common genet, and we're going to be getting two canids as well, being both the Cape fox and the bat-eared fox. So we're getting some really good canid diversity there. Bat-eared fox is going to be an example of one of those species that is going to require termites specifically, as they eat a lot of termites. They are a myrmecophage. They specialize in eating termites. So next, moving on to the medium-sized mammal category, this is where we start getting into more ungulates, for sure. There's still a couple of carnivorans and some other animals, but to kind of start off, we do have our last primate in the medium mammal category, which is our baboon. This is specifically the Chacma baboon, which is one of the largest baboon species. Really great to see. We're also going to be getting a pangolin, which is this specifically is going to be the ground pangolin or the Temminck's pangolin. Really awesome to see. Very important species conservation wise. And we also have a rodent in the medium-sized mammal category, and that is the Cape porcupine. Porcupines are really big in the old world. They're a lot bigger than the porcupines that we have here in North and South America, so it makes sense that they would make this larger category. Besides that, we have another afrothere. We're going to be getting the aardvark, so another myrmecophage, another animal that's going to require you to place termites in order to be able to use it, but great choice. And we also have a couple of carnivores as well. We have the civet, the African civet is this particular species being pictured. And I'm also really excited because we're getting the aardwolf, which is actually not only another species, again, relying on termites, but this is a species of hyena. So really, really great to see the aardwolf being added in. I didn't know if it would necessarily be prioritized, but great to see it being added. The rest of the medium-sized mammals are all ungulates. We do have two pigs being added. There's, of course, the famous warthog. Obviously, the warthog was going to get in, but we're also getting the bush pig, which is of a similar size, but definitely a bit more hairy. Harder to see because it's more nocturnal, but we're getting it as well. And then the rest of them are different types of antelopes. So mostly are smaller sort of antelopes. So things like the steenbuck, which in Setswana I call poodoo hoodoo because that's just way more fun to say. But steenbuck's getting in, which is great. Klipspringer, which is also really good on rough, uneven terrain, that's getting in. And then we also have things like the springbuck. Springbuck is, it's got that very gazelle-like pattern, but it's not a true gazelle. We'll eventually get to springbuck for Planet Zoo and go into more detail on that. But other ones like the impala, we're going to be getting impala, of course, and the Cape bushbuck, which is a really interesting antelope. The male bushbucks, they're very good fighters, very good at fighting off predators. They've even actually killed human hunters that have gone after them, as well as we're going to be getting the Nyala and the Puku. So that's a pretty great selection. Oh, also the red lechwe, that's another medium-sized mammal that we're getting, which really good antelope species in the water, very well adapted for running through thick marshy areas. Really cool. So great medium mammal diversity. And now we're going to start moving into the large herbivores because, of course, once we get to the large stuff, they start dividing it a bit more into herbivore versus carnivore. And this is where I think we start seeing a lot of the really famous stuff that people are excited for. Not that some of the other categories didn't have them, obviously, but this is where we're going to get things like the African bush elephant. We're getting both species of rhinoceros. We're getting both the black rhinoceros and the southern white rhinoceros, as well as the plains zebra. That's the zebra species that we're going to be getting in this game, which is nice. So those are our three odd-toed ungulates, as well as our last afrothere. That's what that all is. And moving on to our other artiodactyls, we have the giraffe. So this is probably the southern giraffe. Giraffe taxonomy is really weird right now, but we are getting a giraffe nonetheless. We're also getting the common hippopotamus, which is another great one to see. And moving down the line, the rest of them are bovids. So our one true bovine that we're getting, of course, is the buffalo, which is, of course, the Cape buffalo. That's the species being represented. But the rest, we're getting tons of great antelopes like the blue wildebeest, the red hartebeest, as well as the sesame, things like the common eland, Ellipsan waterbuck. That's another antelope species that's really well adapted for being out in the water, as well as the greater kudu. That's an antelope that I've worked with in Botswana. Really like it. And the Sitatunga, which is a close relative and, again, really well adapted for those marshy, wetter areas. And we're also getting three of probably one of my favorite antelope groups, the hippotragines. So we're going to be getting the hemsbuck, or the southern oryx, as well as both the roan and the sable. And these are antelopes that are fantastic, got really nice elaborate horns in both sexes, because they will actually use their horns to fight predators very frequently, unlike a lot of other antelope species. So really glad to see all of them added in. But that's our list of large herbivores. So finally, we're going to be moving into the predator category, which is a bit varied. You would expect this to be kind of your biggest charismatic carnivores, but there's quite a bit of variety in here, which is kind of interesting. So to start off with a non-mammal, yes, there are some non-mammals in this category. The first one is the African tigerfish. So this is the only fish that is not a producer card, which is really interesting to see, but it's a really great pick. These are large predatory fish. It's definitely deserving of this spot. We also have two reptiles in this category, which are the Nile crocodile and the African rock python. Really good picks, and I'm glad that they got in and they were able to kind of differentiate themselves from a lot of the other smaller reptiles that got their own category. Moving on, we have two hyena species in here. Both the brown hyena and the spotted hyena got in, which is really great to see. I'm glad that they're showing the diversity of hyena species that you still do have in Africa, because I feel like most people really only acknowledge the spotted hyena. And we also have two canids once again. So we're going to be getting the painted dog, which is a classic, a favorite of a lot of people. If you know it exists, some people think they're hyenas, but they're not. And also the blackback jackal. So we only got one jackal card. You can even tell by the flavor text and just the drawing itself that it's a blackback jackal. So unfortunately, no side striped jackal, but we got every other canid from this region in the game, which is really nice to see. Next up, of course, we have the cats, which I think a lot of people are waiting for, and the cats do not disappoint. We got the black-footed cat, the Afro-Asiatic wildcat, which is the species of wildcat listed, both the serval and the caracal, as well as your big three, which is the cheetah, the leopard, and the lion. So all 7 cat species found in southern Africa made it into the game, which is awesome, especially for me as a cat person. And then we've got 4 mustelids. So we are actually getting both species of otter found in southern Africa. Both the spotted-necked otter and the Cape clawless otter made it in. Really, really cool. What was a surprising listing here to me, especially having it not be listed under small or medium-sized mammal, was the Zorilla, also known as the striped polecat. Listed as a polecat on its card, but that's what this is. Really interesting to see them kind of squeezing it into this predator card, but I'm glad it's here nonetheless, of course. And finally, we have the honey badger. And unfortunately, the flavor text talks about it being fearless, which is an inaccurate stereotype. Honey badgers tend to be in a position where they're desperately fighting off attackers, and they do as well as they can, but more often than not, they are actually getting killed by these larger predators. And that's not something that's easy to tell from a lot of the cherry-picked videos that people use on YouTube, but glad to see that the honey badger's here. Of course, it's a classic African animal. Just wish the flavor text was a bit better. But that's all 160 species that I was able to find evidence for, and hopefully that is the full list. If not, I'll definitely be sure to update later on. We do actually have, for those people contributing to the Kickstarter, there are going to be 3 exclusive animal cards that are based around their climate mini expansion. However, they're not new species. It's just the desert adapted populations for lion, elephant, and giraffe based on some of the arid regions of Namibia. So you're not going to be missing out on any species in particular, but those are some pretty interesting cards if you want to pick them up. And in terms of species that we didn't get, I think there's definitely a couple that would have been nice to see. I think there's a lot of birds that would have been really nice. Southern ground hornbill comes to mind. There's tons of different waterfowl that didn't make it in, things like the white-faced whistling duck or the Egyptian goose or the spur-winged goose, open-bill stork. Saddle-billed stork was one that I was really hoping would get in, so I don't know if Matt and Zara will watch this video, but if they do, first off, congratulations, and I'm very excited for this game, and you've done a lot of great, great work. But I would definitely consider, if it comes out and if it's successful, I would definitely consider a birds expansion, because there's definitely a lot of birds in particular that you could be adding, and I'd really like to see the saddle-billed stork. That's one of my favorites from when I was there. There's even a couple of mammals that would have been nice. I know yellow mongoose in particular comes to mind. I know that we did get 3 mongoose species, but yellow mongoose, I guess, just has a very special place in my heart, so I would have liked to have seen it make the roster, but that's okay. I'm, and all in all, just really, really excited for this game, and I hope that you guys are all excited as well. I've linked the Kickstarter in the video description, and we're definitely going to be covering this as it continues. And I definitely recommend that if you can contribute before October 19th, definitely do, especially if you want some of those stretch goal extras, because I know I definitely do, and that's why I contributed. So this is Dominic from the Wildlife Wire. Hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a bit unorthodox, but it's something that I really wanted to cover, and I'm really glad that this game is being made. So, signing off.